Happy New Year and welcome to another countdown. For the past 4 years, I've had this little New Year's tradition of looking back at the games I've played recently. It's a nice way of documenting my progression with gaming as a medium and keeping my audience in touch with what I'm currently interested in. And man, this year, it was a doozy. Not only did I play a lot more games than usual this time around, the games I played were also really great. I think I can definitively say that every single game I'm talking about today is certified fantastic. I mean, it's like I was dining on a feast fit for a king. Except instead of dining on a feast, I was playing video games. I guess. I don't know. For those of you who are new, I will once again clarify that these are not necessarily games that were released in 2021. These are games that I personally played for the first time. The only limit is that I am restricting the list to one per franchise as a means of keeping things varied. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest. Oh, wait. Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. Damn, that's confusing. Diddy's Conquest is a lovely step up from the first Donkey Kong Country, adding all sorts of new mechanics without sacrificing what made the first game great. In this game, Donkey Kong has been kidnapped, and it's up to resident underdog Diddy and his girlfriend Dixie to save the day. I don't really know what to say for this game that I didn't say about its predecessor. It looks good, it's a great challenge, and it's a ton of fun. The gameplay is more varied though. While Donkey Kong Country stays pretty comfortable in its run left to right jungle levels, Diddy's Conquest pushes the limits the first game provided and isn't afraid to give the player more complex goals through its less rigid level structure and use of animal helpers. I should also give direct accolades to this game's exceptional soundtrack. David Wise did a great job here, especially with the song Sticker Bush Symphony, which you may also recognize as the greatest song ever written in all of human history. It's such a serene, wistful track that always had me dancing whenever it came on. Well, not really dancing. It's not much of a dance song. It's more of a transcendental, lie down, close my eyes, and align myself spiritually with the beating heart of the rainforest kind of song. God, you know, these past few years have been good to Spider-Man fans. Things like Spider-Verse and the MCU films are great, but on the video game side of things, Insomniac Games have made sure Spidey fans have been treated like kings. One of my friends sold me her old PS4 last year, and when I bought it, there were a few games I was thinking of getting, but one of the first ideas that popped into my head was getting Marvel's Spider-Man. And yeah, it was really good. I know the whole makes you feel like Spider-Man line has been reduced to meme status at this point, but I can't help but sympathize with the people who say it. After all, this game controls like a dream, and the sensation of swinging across buildings as Peter is so cathartic. I remember being a kid watching the Sam Raimi films, just wishing I could have Peter's superpowers myself. I'm sure I wasn't alone with that fantasy. Everyone wants to swing around like Spider-Man, so it's no wonder everyone uses that line when talking about the game, because capturing that experience we all want is kind of the point. The story is also great. This may be my favorite rendition of Peter Parker in years. The fact that he's older works as a pleasant contrast to Holland's more juvenile depiction of the character, and it makes it so we can jump right into the plot without having to establish the whole Uncle Ben Spider-Bite stuff all over again. The character performances are fantastic, and the superb cast kept me engaged the whole way through. Shout out to Doc Ock and Aunt May, and MJ, and Peter of course. So yeah, I love this game, and I'm so excited for its upcoming sequel. Number 8 is, unfortunately, a tie entry. Not because I think I like these games the same amount, but because they're from the same series and I don't know which one I actually prefer. The two games are Metroid Prime 2 Echoes and Metroid Dread. It really doesn't help that I played Prime 2 like 8 months ago and Dread a matter of weeks ago. One game is a lot fresher in my head than the other because of that. You know, it's crazy to think about how there used to be a time where I could say to someone that Metroid wasn't really my thing with a straight face. Because after diving further and further into the series over the last year, I found a lot of definitive evidence that Metroid is in fact my thing. I used to write off the game's premise and setting as just generic space sci-fi stuff, but as I've gotten more into the series, I developed a fondness for it, especially Samus as a character. And if there's one thing both of these games do, it's make Samus badass as fuck. Like, my god. Super Metroid is a classic, but its level of abstraction and lack of close-up cutscenes doesn't really beat in how fucking cool Samus is in the same way Echoes and Dread do. These games have gorgeously animated 3D cutscenes that really show Samus as just totally alpha and badass without a single line of dialogue from her. Well, actually, there's like one line of dialogue in Dread, but it's so well timed that it really accentuates the fact that there is no dialogue from her anywhere else. Dread as a game was something I was honestly really skeptical of. If you've kept close with this channel over the last few years, you would know that I've been keeping newer Nintendo releases at an arm's distance since 2018 or so. Like, I understand that game development is hard and everything, but with a couple exceptions, Nintendo as a company just seems to have developed quite the unfortunate corner-cutting habit. See Mario spin-offs and Animal Crossing for example. But Metroid Dread did not fall into this trap, and was a refreshingly fun modern Nintendo game, and that was nice. The Emmy gimmick was also a really cool addition, and gave this game a unique set of challenges that I haven't experienced in Metroid yet. It was a fun surprise release that was a lovely gesture to Metroid fans. Let's hope that Metroid Prime 4 comes out eventually. But, you know, we should probably temper ourselves. We must be careful, Jill. Every resident in this house is evil. I used to not have an interest in horror games, but then I played Resident Evil. And now, well, I'm hooked. First of all, I have to give accolades to how fantastic this game looks. It came out in 2002, and is probably the best looking game from that era today. It looks fantastic, and I am in love with it. Now I'll say it, Resident Evil isn't actually that scary. Maybe there was a point in time when it was to people, but really I was never so spooked that I legitimately didn't want to play the game. It can certainly be thrilling though. Having to make quick split-second decisions while you're on the verge of death is very engaging, and I found myself sitting up straight to give the game my full attention. I made the mistake of picking Chris in my first playthrough, and I really regret it. Chris can be fun if you know what to do, but his low inventory size makes navigating the areas without prior knowledge really frustrating. Jill's extra slots make it a lot easier for new players to explore and take what they need without having to constantly visit the stores to trade things out. I feel like even the game expects you to pick Jill first. Like, it's so funny. When you first come across a zombie on Chris's route, he doesn't even react. It doesn't shock him at all. Meanwhile, Jill actually has a reasonable reaction to the event, which makes a lot more sense if you're seeing her reanimate a dead person for the first time. It's almost as if they didn't bother to include Chris's reaction because they didn't want to be redundant. But yeah, Resident Evil 1 was a great time, and I look forward to exploring the series further. One thing I wish I had done sooner in my own life was trying to get into Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. It's a common opinion among Pokemon fans in my age group that the Mystery Dungeon series hosts some of the best experiences you can have with the wider Pokemon franchise. And I've met many people who say that Explorers of Sky is their favorite Pokemon game ever, even surpassing the main series games. But I never really got into them. I had the games, but I never really dedicated any time to try and play them through, and that's honestly something I really regret. In 2021, I decided to finally play through Explorers of Sky, to see what the hype was really all about. So I booted it up on my 3DS, and, well, the game froze. Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was a problem with my DS, but once I looked at the back of the cartridge, it was pretty clear the guy who sold this to me on eBay 8 years ago ripped me off. Compared to a cartridge that I bought new, the difference is obvious. So, to whoever sold me this game in 2013, go fuck yourself. Instead, I played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, and although it wasn't the definitive experience, I still had a pleasant playthrough. The story is simple compared to most other RPGs I've played, but honestly the family-friendly cheeriness and good old-fashioned Nintendo DS presentation did a lot to melt my ice-cold, cynical heart. I had a great time, and the friendship my character formed with his partner character was very sweet and touching. Playing this game also reminded me of how much more developers would do in video games in this era. This game has a main story campaign, but once you finish it, there is a whole other campaign that is about as long as the first one, which is just crazy to me. Remember when that was a thing in Pokemon games? Post-game content? Man, I miss that. But at least I can still play these classic games. Guys, guess what? I finally played A Link to the Past, and it was awesome! I probably should have played it years ago, but better late than never, I guess. Maybe I should also finally play Ocarina of Time. Maybe. Zelda's always been a bit hard for me to get into. I've played several games from the series at this point, but I can't really say that I've ever really grown obsessed with any of them. I've never had a day where all I can think about is getting home to play some Zelda or something. It just hasn't really captivated me like that yet. And to be fair, most games don't do that. but the way people go on about this series makes me feel like I'm missing out on something. Like, I'm having a good time, but it seems like everyone has some tearjerker story about their favorite Zelda game being an escape for them at a grim time in their own life. And I'm just here like, oh yeah, Link to the Past is fun because I like the hookshot and it's fun to use it. I feel like I'm not tasting the Kool-Aid, I suppose. I don't mean to sound negative though. This game is still number 5 on my list for a reason. It's a blast to play. Before A Link to the Past, there were only 2 Zelda games, the original and The Adventure of Link. And no offense to the NES purists out there, but this game is a huge step up from its predecessors for me. It essentially kickstarted the series, and its structure acts as the foundation every following Zelda game would be built off of until Breath of the Wild, which is like a 25-year-long reign. For me personally, it's the most fun I've had with the series. It's very straight and to the point, a very meat and potatoes adventure, but that is a big positive. The experience is silky smooth, and because of that I had a hard time finding a stopping point. It's that enjoyable. I was constantly being hit with new ideas, new gimmicks, and new ways to play that I never wanted to put the game down, and that's a high honor. I always seem to forget how good the Ace Attorney games are. Whenever I replay one of the games, I find myself astonished at how much better it is than I remember. For whatever reason, I seem to have a habit of remembering the less fun things about Ace Attorney a lot better than the more fun things. I played a lot of Ace Attorney this year. It started when I played the Great Ace Attorney 1 in the spring, and that really put me on a big Ace Attorney kick. I then replayed Trials and Tribulations, which is an old favorite of mine. And then, with the motivation of making an Ace Attorney Iceberg video, I decided to fill in one of the most embarrassing blind spots as an Ace Attorney fan. I never actually finished the Miles Edgeworth investigation games, for the most part. I played most of the first game in middle school, but honestly, I did not like it. I made it to Case 5, but had to do it with a guide the whole time because I was constantly getting bored and taking long breaks, which is a really bad thing to do if your goal is to enjoy and actually finish an Ace Attorney game. I was in this uncomfortable purgatory state of technically having played most of the game, but not remembering any of it, and because of that, I chose to bite the bullet and just restart the game from scratch. Otherwise, I would have had the dilemma of sitting through a few hours of a visual novel where I had completely forgotten all the major story details. So I ended up replaying it, and surprisingly, I had finished it within like a week. And I still generally have mixed feelings about it. It's certainly not as frustrating or incoherent as I remember it being, but I definitely did not find myself that engaged with the whole narrative. But I felt like I deserved to give the game another shot, especially because I also wanted to play its sequel, which I never played until this year. And holy crap, you guys were right. This game is fantastic. I legitimately thought you all were pulling my leg. I mean, I would hear people talk about how great Investigations 2 is, but I always assumed they were exaggerating a bit. But my god, after playing it, I was just stunned at how much fun it was to play. It basically takes everything good about the first game and brings it up to 11. Like, I was originally expecting to be talking to you about the Great Ace Attorney in this segment, but I was pretty much certain that this game was going to be taking home the gold by the second case. Like, it's almost too enjoyable. Here I was, playing it and thinking to myself, are Yamazaki spin-offs allowed to be this good? Because I'm not lying when I say it gives my old favorites of the series a good run for their money. And I am glad to have finally played it after shrugging it off for years. It's absolutely a must-play for any big fan of the mainline games. Just make sure you play the first Investigations game before. Persona is often the butt of a lot of jokes, but despite all the ridicule, I'd be totally lying to you if I didn't say I enjoy it. As I said in my list for last year, the series has something for everyone, and I think in recent years it's gotten so big because of that. I finally got to play Persona 5 this year, specifically Persona 5 Royal, and I had a blast playing it through. Despite its approximately 150 million billion trillion hour playtime, I found myself starting and finishing this game in only a couple of weeks. But, I mean, can you really blame me? Persona as a series is just so easy to get lost in. The combination of the life simulation and RPG mechanics really turns the whole adventure into an all-encompassing experience. It's no wonder people make fun of Atlus fans for not having any social lives. It's because games like these become their social lives. Hey man, I'm sorry, but I can't have lunch with you today. Me and my friend Yusuke already made plans. For those weeks I was playing this game, I was a Phantom Thief. That was my life. The whole being a YouTuber college student in Florida thing was playing second fiddle. I had corrupt adults to psychologically rewire. I really hope that Persona 3 gets re-released in some form in the coming years, because currently, I only have Persona 4 and 5 under my belt, and I really want to continue dipping my toes into Persona and Shin Megami Tensei in general. I guess I could try out that new Megami Tensei game that was released a few months back. Maybe. Xenogears was honestly really hard to properly place in this list. The game has a lot of really great aspects to it, but I would be lying if I said I was totally having the time of my life the whole way through. Like Earthbound Beginnings, the game I recently reviewed, it has a lot of great ideas but suffers due to its age. It can often be slow, and the adventuring part of the game is definitely its weakest part. But I'd be damned if I told you I wasn't having the time of my life with this game's narrative. The game was written by Tetsuya Takahashi, the same guy who's behind Xenoblade Chronicles, and you can really tell based on the material this game covers. At its core, it may look to you like your typical shonen Japanese fantasy RPG, but describing Xenogears that way is doing it a total disservice. Xenogears certainly fits into the JRPG trope, but it goes all out with how deep and complex its story gets. Xenogears' narrative is super interesting, especially because the story covers a plethora of obscure philosophical premises. If you like your RPGs with a touch of some ancient Jewish mysticism, a sprinkle of Jungian and Freudian psychology, and a buttload of Gnostic imagery, then you'll probably be as enthralled with Xenogears as I was. Though, the game definitely isn't without its faults. Xenogears is effectively the poster child for video games that tried too much. Takahashi tried to stuff all these ideas he had into one game, and although that game is really cool, it's also blatantly unfinished. All the resources that went into the writing of the game neglected things like the maps. If you've gotten to Disc 2 in the game, you know what I'm talking about. My first playthrough just felt a bit disorienting. The game does so much for you, almost to a fault really. Like, you're basically just being bussed everywhere for the first 20 hours of the game, that it's really hard to get a good feel for where you are at any given time and how to get from place to place. It's a borderline visual novel with how few benchmarks or natural stopping points the story has, and sometimes you will go several hours without having a single in-game battle. I've never heard anyone use this term before, but I felt what I will now call JRPG anxiety through a lot of my playthrough of the game. I was constantly unsure if I was understanding the plot and gameplay, whether I was under-leveled, if I had the right armor and weapons, if I was missing anything important, etc. The good thing is that I wasn't, and I could beat the game with no super serious trouble. Xenogears is an outstanding game, but playing it isn't the smoothest experience. It's a bit messy, slippery when wet, but I still put it this high because I adored the story. It was so ambitious and engaging that it made up for all its issues, and I can say definitively that I love this game, and my adoration for it will probably only grow bigger as time passes. Earthbound-like is a term used to apply to a certain kind of role-playing game that clearly takes heavy inspiration from the irreverent comedy and artistic direction of Earthbound. This includes all sorts of games, like Citizens of Earth, Omori, and, Yick. Honestly though, I've always kind of avoided getting into these games, mostly for personal reasons. Earthbound is a special game to me, and the relationship I have with it is sacred in a weird way. A lot of games that attempt to replicate it just kind of feel jarring to me. I don't really know how to explain it. So I have a bad habit of avoiding these games more than I probably should. And it's definitely a bad habit, because I end up avoiding really fantastic games for way longer than necessary. Like seriously, I played Lisa the Painful this year, and I'm almost angry with myself for not having played it years ago. Because, holy shit, this game makes me feel things I don't think I've felt in years. Lisa the Painful is certainly a game inspired by Earthbound. Just looking at the character designs in the game should make that clear, but it's even less subtle when you look at the designs of the game preceding it, Lisa the First. I'm pretty sure that's just an edited Earthbound sprite. The influence is certainly worn on its sleeves, but that shouldn't make you think this game is just a lame rehash of the golden oldies. Because trust me, it's really, really not. It is so much more. Lisa, like a lot of the games that come from its genre, isn't afraid to make you laugh and then punch you in the gut until you cry. It can be absolutely hilarious and also just soul-crushingly bleak. Like, before playing this game, I would see people make dramatic disclaimers about how dark it can get with its gritty portrayals of very sensitive subject matter, and I assumed they were being a bit hyperbolic. But no, this game is really fucked up. Like, you thought Mother 3 was depressing? Lisa will definitely give it a run for its money. I don't want to go into detail, but be prepared to feel a lot of things. I think one thing I honestly love about this game is how it was made in RPG Maker VX Ace. Like, the same engine I made my Master Jake Studios RPG in. And that just makes the game so much more charming to me, to be honest. Some people might not feel the same, but that a game this absolutely rich was made in an engine that people often scoff at as amateur or useless just invigorates me. I'm not saying I have even half the writing skill needed to make a game as powerful as this, but it feels like I could figure out how to make a game like this. I mean, I've used RPG Maker for years. It makes me happy that something this great can be made on such a simple engine. But yeah, Lisa is absolutely fantastic. It's the kind of game that rekindles the love I have for gaming as an art form, and if you haven't played it, well, definitely check it out. If you can handle it at least. It's not for everyone.